Good morning. Today we are going to see what listening is all about. We already have heard about hearing and listening. Now let's see what listening want to say about. What is listening? If you ask a group of people to give a one-word description of listening, some would say hearing. But listening is following and understanding the sound. It is hearing with a purpose. Yes, it is hearing with a purpose. If you go into the definition of listening, it is a process of receiving, constructing meaning from, and responding to spoken and or non-verbal messages to hear something with thoughtful attention. What is the difference between listening and versus hearing? Hearing is a physical process, or so called as natural, or called as a passive. But listening is a physical as well as hearing, but and a mental process. It is very active. It is a learned process and a skill. That's why we have taken this listening as a skill development program. Listening is hard. You need practice to have an active listener. Listening is a conscious activity based on three basic skills. Number one, attitude. Number two, attention. Number three, adjustment. Attitude. Maintain a constructive attitude. Attention. Strive to pay attention. Adjustment. Cultivate a capacity for adjustments. Now, what is empathy in listening? It is a reflection of content and feeling at a deeper level, understanding and responding. To try and get an understanding of what may be the deeper feelings. Here is an example of how empathic listening differ from the other type of listening. A computer instructor explains with enthusiasm how to use a new word processing program. She certainly enjoys teaching this word processing program. I think she would enjoy teaching any subject. She seems very impressed with the usefulness of this new version. Her feelings about teaching, the importance to her of teaching this particular program, and her valuation of the program. Empathizing does not mean you need to agree with your partner. Empathizing does not mean you need to give into your partner. Empathizing means you do not dismiss what your partner says as a ridiculous or silly. The underlying meaning of the word empathizing is to understand your partner. It is easy to know when you are being empathic because your body language and your tone of your language matches. Your tone and your feeling matches. You are focused on what your partner is saying and meaning. Listening is needed everywhere. Listening skills form the basis of the continued learning, the teamwork skills, the management skills, the negotiation skills, the emotional intelligence too. 70% of the all communication is misunderstood, misinterpreted, rejected, distorted, not heard. Listening is an active process that has three basic steps: hearing, understanding, and judging. As we have seen this word hearing in the first few slides, that it is just a passive, natural, physical process. But in listening, hearing also should be there. In understanding and judging, we should be empathize with your partner. Now, the types of listening. There are four types: active listening, selective listening, active listening, and the reflective listening. Now, we are going to see what our main topic, active listening, is all about. What is active listening? It's a way of listening and responding to another person that improves mutual understanding. A way of paying attention to other people that can make them feel that you are hearing them. This type of listening is called active because it requires certain behaviors of the listener. Our brain works four times the speed that someone can speak. You have to be actively focused on listening so that your mind does not wander. It enriches you and those around you and guides other areas of your life. It can build trust and respect between people and prevent misunderstandings that can lead to conflict, frustration, or hurt feelings. While listening to other people's point of view, you may just learn something new and fascinating. We listen at a speed of 125 to 250 words per minute. What we think at a speed of around 1000 to 3000 words per limit. 75% of the time we are distracted, preoccupied, or forgetful. 20% of the time we remember what we hear. More than 35% of business think listening is a top skill of success. Less than 2% of people have had formal education with listening. What are the benefits of active listening? It forces people to listen attentively to others. It tends to open people up to get them to say more. It shows empathy. It builds relationships. I think that is the most important thing that we have to know about active listening. It will build relationships. Now, what are main goals to active listening? It will maximize your understanding of the other's perspective, empathizing, minimize their defensiveness and your own too. Now, what are the key concepts of active listening? It will display involvement in what the person is saying. Carefully observe the person speaking. It will resist distractions. It will try to stay focused on what is being said. It will ask for clarification of anything that you do not fully understand. It will delay making judgments about what is said. Active listeners speak 30% of the time and listen 70% of the time. Sometimes we have to try hard not to interrupt. The only acceptable reason is to clarify or confirm what has been said. Is it active listening a difficult thing? Do you think so? After hearing all these points of being with an active listening, do you think it is difficult? Let's see. There are certain occasions where you try to feel this active listening a difficult task. Point number one, when people are preoccupied with current life stresses or difficult situations, it is hard for them to listen. When you are getting anxiety, it can make it hard to listen. Now, being angry at the person who is talking also makes it hard to listen. Having an idea in mind of what a person should do makes it hard to listen to that person's point of view, or sometimes we become so egoistic. When we are so egoistic, or when we are being angry, we don't pay an active listener. Yes. Now, what are the barriers of the active listeners? There are certain external barriers, of course, it is there. Now, we'll see what are the internal barriers. Internal barriers within the listener, of the internal barriers within the speaker. Now, two things, main important things, will makes you a barrier in the active listening process. Let's see one by one. As I told you, the external barriers, noises, definitely, clutters, firstly, other interpretations, anything can. Internal barriers within the listening, comparing. Yes, when somebody is compared with the somebody, and we try to being part of that comparison, comparing, it will be a barrier. Now, personal experience. When we speaks about something, when that topic is a part of our personal life, we are not able to listen even. Automatic talking, mind reading, judging, daydreaming, obviously, perceptual errors. This all being a part of the internal barriers within the listener. The barriers within the speaker. Now we know it very well that, or we know it very well that when a speaker comes in front of an audience, he has certain expectations. My listeners, my audience will be like this. Yes, one important barrier is expectations. Then avoidance and speaking in chord or with boundaries. These are all the barriers within the speaker. Now, when to use this active listening? There are certain areas where we don't use this active listening, and there are certain areas where we want to use this active listening. There are certain routine interactions and physical emergencies we don't need be a part of the active listening, but there are areas where we have to use our full amount or full content or full structure of the active listening into it. The organizational crisis. When any organization is into crisis situations, We have to have a active listening to what they want to say. Now, conflict situations, giving and receiving feedbacks, brainstorming, problem solving, seeking the peers' cooperation. These are the areas where we have to have an appropriate active listening. Now, there are certain steps of being an active listening. First one, obviously, we have to be listen. Next, we have to have a questions. Third one, we have to reflect it upon. And fourth one, we have to agree to that statement. Now, step number one, we have to listen. We have to listen to feelings as well as words, like words of emotions or implications. We have to listen on focus on the speaker. Don't plan, speak, or get distracted. What is the speaker talking about? Is it the topic, the speaker, the listener, or others? Look at the speaker and use verbal or non-verbal encourages. Don't be a passive listener. That's the main thing the step one lesson want to say about. Opening door to good conversation shows an interest, but it must be done sincerely without judgment. Like the verbal and non-verbal encourages, and second one, the non-verbal behavior. Encouragement. Convey interest and keep the person in talking. Concentrate attention upon the speaker. Don't agree or disagree. Use non-committal words in a positive tone of voice. Repeat one or two words of the person's previous statement. Be aware of your body languages. Use varying voice intonations. Now, these are the certain key points where you can be an active listener with a point called as encouragement. Use various voice intonations like I see, right? Ah, okay, sure, yeah, yes, wow, really? And there is a funny cartoon also. Yes, like non-verbal behavior. The non-verbal active listening techniques. It maintaining an appropriate eye contact with the interviewee. Occasionally, nodding affirmatively to display understanding and interest. The main point of the non-verbal behavior. Using expectant poses to indicate the interview that more is expected. Now we can go so to the various forms of the non-verbal communications. Obviously, touch, giving a shake hand, the sound, the smell, the timing, and the speed of delivery of a speech. If it goes with a random speed even, nobody will try to listen. If it is in a slow mode even, proximity, your posture, your dress, your eye contact, your gestures, your facial expressions, and the use of silence or poses. Now, communication through eyes, we can have a number of questions. There are three purposes for questions in listening. It will demonstrate that you are listening. It will help you to gather informations, and definitely it will help you to clarify your query upon that thing. When you ask some questions, you shall have to show interest, You should have to encourage with more explanation. You have to keep the person talking. You should have to ask questions, but make sure not too many questions. Now, being a part of the active listening, you should have to know what are types of questions which you can throw to the speaker. Obviously, yes or no questions, the open minded questions, the probing or follow up questions, leading questions. Now, the yes or no questions. This type of questions involves asking a question that requires only a yes or no response. It's called as a closed one. There is no need of explanations more into that one when an yes or no question is being asked. Now, the open minded questions. In an observation, you can use the statement, what happened? Then, for finding the meaning, what do you mean by that statement? Affect, how do you feel right now? To motivate, what do you want? And then action, what will you do? These are open minded questions which you can. Now, the follow up questions. Asking another question to clarify or obtain further information about an interviewer's response. The leading questions. It is phrased to indicate a preferred response. It indicates the auditor asking questions is not objective. Now we should have to summarize it. Why you do it? To review the progress, to pull together important ideas and information, to establish a foundation for further discussion. How do you do it? Restate the central ideas and feelings you have heard. For example, let's see if I have a clear understanding of your experience at this point. Now, remember that the objective of all this is increase understanding of others' point of view, not necessarily to agree with it or support it. A good listener tries to understand thoroughly what other person is saying. In the end, he may disagree sharply, but before he disagrees, he wants to know exactly what it is he is disagreeing with, says Kenneth Wells. Now, a evaluation from your point of view. Are you a good listener? Do you think do you frequently think of others things when others are talking to you? Do you doodle, shuffle papers, or look at the clock or out the window, or read the newspapers or watch TV? Do you silently argue with the talker? Do you only selectively hear ideas that fit your beliefs? Do you feel most people have little to talk about that is interesting or important? Do you listen passively without any facial expressions? Do you frequently interrupt others as they are talking? Do you complete sentences or ideas for people when they pause to think? Do you silently criticize characteristics of the speaker, like the voice, the looks, or the manner of speaking? Do you have to ask people to repeat what they said because you have forgotten it? Now, there are certain important qualities of the active listeners. Be there. Listen carefully to the person. First and foremost, accept the person and his or her feelings. Stay with the other person's point of view without becoming that person. Trust the person enough to keep out of it. Now, we are going to have a conclusion of whatever we have learned in this active listening process. Listening is a critical communication skill for managers and consultants, as well as for all of us in our personal lives. You can't negotiate effectively until you understand what the other person wants. Active listening is crucial to achieving your ultimate communication objectives. Active listening is a skill that, like other communication skills, must be developed. By practicing, you can develop these skills. So, my dear listeners, I hope you have an active listening process based on this topic or this session named active listening. Thank you.